This program is powered by thevirtual.show, making your offline events virtual. Ladies and gentlemen, the host of WEBIT Virtual, Dr. Plamen Russev.
Hello and welcome, wonderful WEBIT community from all around the world. We see so many people registering for this particular event today, which is with some of the most amazing movers and shapers in the future of work and education. Thank you so much for joining from all around the world. A couple of minutes ago, I've checked the final registered number, and I've seen over 130 countries, 133 countries. That's quite amazing. And I'm again so grateful for all of you who have so many things to do now. It's 8 a.m. in Silicon Valley, and it's like almost, I think, 11 in China. And that's so amazing to have all of you with us. I'm not sure when I say I wish I want to go back to our in-person events, if we are always going to be having such an amazing audience. We've never had at WEBIT that many thousands of people in one single auditorium like here. So currently we are almost 8,000 seated, all in front of us, waiting for one of the most exciting content weeks, the week of the future of work and education. If there is a future, and this is the desirable future that we all want to build in, it will be built because of education, because of educated people who will accept that the new normal is the real normal, that the old normal was terrible. It was basically making so many animals extinct, so many troubles and so many lakes and oceans polluted. Should I go on? So hopefully these new educated people, all of us, will make this new normal. We have no time for me speaking here. We have so many amazing participants in this particular thought leadership forum that I will start immediately presenting you the first one. Look who he is.
Salman Khan is the founder of Khan Academy, a non-profit organization in Silicon Valley with the mission of providing a free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere. Khan Academy's content and mastery learning platform has more than 100 million registered users from all over the world and has been localized into more than 40 languages.
Sal, welcome to the WEBIT Virtual Studio.
Great to be here, Plamen.
I'm so happy to have you finally at WEBIT. It's virtual, but still, I do appreciate how busy you are having 100 million people learning from the platform you have created and keeping it not for profit, making the world a better place. You, Sal, you're a true star, and I'm one of your most devoted fans. So thank you so much for joining, really.
No, it's a real honor. Thanks for having me.
Sal, we are all in one and the same boat, which is in the ocean of the COVID crisis, trying to find our way to the shores, hopefully building that new world. How is that changing the way you work and the way you function at Khan Academy, and also yourself?
Yeah, you know, Khan Academy, it's interesting. We were already a pseudo virtual organization. We had about 35% of our team. We're over 200 people. A lot of people think Khan Academy is still just me in a closet, although I'm back in the closet where Khan Academy all started. But so it was fairly straightforward for us to virtualize as an organization. I think the difficult thing, and I'm probably speaking for families around the world, and you know, I'm sure we're going to talk about it in terms of how families are dealing with education, but you can imagine a lot of our team members with young children at home, especially children under the age of 5, when you're trying to work at home and you're also trying to homeschool and you're also trying to take care of those young children. I think that's been the biggest pain point. But there, I think you alluded to it just now. There's definitely been some silver linings where we're able to connect with people faster. I've never been, those who know me well know that I'm not a huge fan of airplanes for many, many reasons. So to be able to still see all of y'all without having to get on an airplane, and to be able to be with my family at the same time, I think that's definitely a silver lining of all of this.
I can't agree more. I used to travel 200 days per year, and those who know me well know that I don't like planes. So it's even worse, I would say. But yes, the silver lining here, having time to spend with your family and focus on your real impact. And in your case, this social entrepreneurship impact that you're having is phenomenal. I'm meeting families, large organizations almost daily in a calls, discussions on where the impact investment is heading. When is it finally going to not to be called impact? What you're doing is really I'm speechless to say. So you've mentioned a month ago that kids might never go back to school the same way they were there. I think I'm rephrasing you. So what do you think will happen? How do you see the future of education?
Yeah, and before this crisis, many folks, I know many folks on this panel and many folks outside of this panel have been talking about the need for better access to world-class materials. That even pre-COVID crisis, in a lot of places, including some wealthy areas, students didn't have access. Even if they said they taught a course, the course wasn't necessarily taught at a very rigorous level. And then we know in many other places there might not have even been a course. And then there's this notion of personalization. This is something that we've spoken about for a long time. I know many others on this panel. And the idea that when students are moved in kind of a fixed pace lockstep method, they get a 70% on a test, they don't know 30%, that just gets put as a grade in their transcript. Then they move on to the next concept. Those gaps just keep accumulating, and that eventually leads to students hitting a wall when they get to an algebra class or trigonometry class. And it happens in other subjects outside of math as well. So that was pre-COVID crisis. And so you can imagine now with the COVID crisis, the access issue becomes that much more pronounced, because all students, I think the last number I saw was something like 1.5 billion students around the world are at least not physically attending school who normally would have been. And so how are they going to access? And then if you're going to provide that access, are there ways to leapfrog what they had before? And then since they are leaning more on these, digital tools, on Khan Academy and other things, there's an opportunity to make it more active learning for them, as opposed to just passively sitting in lectures. There's an opportunity for it to be more personalized or differentiated so that they can really learn at their own time and pace. And so as we go into the summer, we're finishing up the school year in most of the Northern Hemisphere right now. We go into the summer, we go into this coming back to school in the fall. What we're hearing from school districts around the world is, for sure, this coming term will not be normal. There's ideas around doing some type of shift-based model where maybe you have half of the students come on a given day and then the other half come on the next day. Everyone is preparing for the notion that you might have to go back to distance learning quite quickly if we see a second or third wave of the virus come by. And the one thing that everyone realizes is that no matter what you do, there's going to be a subset of the students. They might have immune issues. They might have a family member, an elderly family member in the home, that no matter what the school does, those families are not going to feel comfortable sending their kids to school until we are 6 months, 12 months in the future, when we're essentially maybe beyond the virus. And that actually might be even further out, depending on what happens with vaccines and antivirals and whatever else. And so in this world that I just described, which is really the coming school year, you're going to have to be able to fluidly go between a physical experience and a virtual experience, really with very little notice. So that's naturally going to make all systems around the world lean more on virtual, even when school is in session, so that if they have to go, they can lean on it more heavily if they go virtual. And when they do that, what we're recommending, and I think there's a lot of openness to this, and that's another silver lining, a lot of things that people might have been had a little inertia around, now they're open to new ideas, is to be able to allow students to learn at their own time and pace. Every school district, every educator on the planet knows that you have what we call a summer slide, where not only do you not learn over the summer, you forget. This year, it's going to be 6 months COVID summer slide. And a lot of researchers are telling us that this would be a year of learning loss, because not only are you not learning for 6 months, you're forgetting as well. And so we're working hard with districts to ensure that students can, in a personalized way, start at the basics, master all the concepts that they might have had gaps in, even pre-COVID, so that they can get to grade level and then even work on that at their own time and pace, and then and maybe hopefully get even beyond grade level. So the negative, more gaps, more students are going to have access issues. The positive is this is making everyone think deeply about this, think differently about this, and we might actually be able to finally address some of these issues that have existed well before COVID.
Sal, I've been following very, very closely every word you say, and I didn't want to interrupt you, even though there were like at least 3 questions. I wanted to stop you speaking while we were speaking, but obviously people also wanted to listen to you while we were talking. We already have almost 9,000 people, and you've mentioned another number, 1.5 billion students studying from home. This is phenomenal. And so now the question is, if they haven't been to physical classrooms so far and they're still studying, can we use COVID to basically reinvent the education system? Because we all speak, and our next very dear friend and a fantastic person, Esther, who is joining after our discussion with you, we've been discussing this education system is an education system for factory workers, and obviously it needs to be reinvented, but most probably reconstructed.
Yeah, I think you're going to see what you could almost view it as an unbundling. I think you're going to see that probably most pronounced in higher education, because you see this phenomenon right now where students pay a lot of tuition, and this coming school year might be fully online at a lot of universities, at least this first term. Obviously University of Cambridge in the UK announced the next school year will be online. And so now it's making people realize, okay, how and where can I learn things? And they're realizing that they can learn in modalities like the modality. We're having a great conversation right now, a stimulating conversation. In fact, sometimes the interactive conversation on a video conference can be more active, more interactive than a passive lecture where you're sitting 300 students in a room. And I think a lot of folks, including universities, are realizing that. And the COVID crisis is catalyzing even universities to finally say, hey, maybe we should be more interactive. Maybe we should be less passive, because if I just give you a lecture for an hour on Zoom, that might as well just be a video. And so that I think we're already seeing, and students are saying, well, okay, education, at least higher education, there's the interaction, the learning piece of it. There is the socialization piece of it, where you're hanging out in the dorm room or in the quad or your clubs or your activities. And then there's the credentialing part. And I do suspect those are going to get more. People are going to start mixing and matching those in ways that make more sense for them. I think if you talk about K-12, there might also be this unbundling where people realize that some of the knowledge acquisition, some of the learning could happen on forums like this. Now, it's always optimal if you have this amazing, perfect in-person Socratic dialogue, but we know that that's not what's happening in many or even most schools around the world. And so using video conferencing, online tools, there might be a way to help more students have access to truly world-class ways to access knowledge, to be able to interact with others. But I do think, especially for younger students, maybe K through 8, especially K through 9, that in-person experience, however you can get it, is also really essential. So, we're talking to folks who are talking about models like you have a virtual school, but then people also collect at physical centers where they can do their activities, where they can work in groups, they can focus on the socialization and the social emotional learning there. And then when you get into that late high school, college, I think that's where people can mix and match a little bit. So it will make us think about these things a bit differently.
Sal, I'm wondering how difficult it is to educate 100 million people. That's a staggering number that are using Khan Academy. Even more staggering that you do all this only with 200 people. That's like crazy. So what kind of challenges do you face today?
Well, it's generous of you to say that. Well, I think, you know, the real thing that keeps me up at night is, and COVID has accelerated it a good bit, is our vision, our mission as a nonprofit, free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. There's been three parts of that vision. The first vision is access to courses from pre-K through the core of college, across subjects and grades in all of the languages, or all of the major languages of the world. So that by itself is a major undertaking. So I always feel urgency. Okay, what more subjects can we add? How can we support many of the teams around the world who are localizing that content? There's over 45 translation projects. The second pillar of ours is personalization. How do we let students learn at their own time and pace, fill in the gaps? And so there's constantly, we're having debates in the organization. How do we engage folks better? How do we make sure that we can leverage the data to inform teachers so they can make better interventions? How do we make sure that what we're doing is efficacious? And then the third pillar is, how do we take the work that students are able to do on Khan Academy and eventually provide signals to the world that these students can get into a university, that they should be able to get a job. And that's the work that we're at a very nascent stage at Khan Academy, but the COVID crisis in many ways has accelerated it. In terms of, the thing that is probably the most difficult, as you can imagine, any organization as it grows and it scales, how do you keep it aligned? How do you make sure that the servers, with the COVID crisis, we've seen our traffic be almost 3x of what it typically is. So, we were seeing about 30 million learning minutes per day. Now we're seeing closer to 80 or 90 million learning minutes per day.
Wow.
So, how do you keep up with that type of thing? But the real thing is, how do we make sure that we can communicate? We're primarily funded by philanthropy. So communicating to the philanthropic world, to the corporate world, to governments, that Khan Academy isn't the only part of this puzzle. It's many actors together, including the existing physical education system. But Khan Academy is an incredibly high social return on investment, as you alluded to. We're the budget of a large high school, but we serve over 100 million students every year. And so, a lot of my time is spent convincing folks that this is a good use of resources. So if there's philanthropists or potential corporate partners out there, definitely talk to us.
I don't even dare to calculate what is the price, the value, sorry, not the price, excuse my English, the value of your 1 hour you spent with our viewers now. And I would like to ask all of you from all around the world, use the social media channels and ask your questions with hashtag Twitter, and you know how to reach us, of course. So please feel free to do this. And definitely from now on, we shall expand 1 hour program, because it's not possible to stop ask questions to Sal and to the other amazing participants that are upcoming to our virtual studio today. That's truly phenomenal. Sal, I would like to ask you for your visionary and maybe dreamy idea of how education would look like in the next 3, 5, and 10 years.
Well, I mean, if you go, I think 3 years in the near future, you're going to see Khan Academy and other tools, I guess for lack of a word, get better. You're going to see, frankly, all of the subjects and grades, starting with pre-K, the humanities, mathematics, all the way through high school and college. I think and this is already, I would say 60% true or 70% true. You will be able to learn all of that material. I think over the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see the modalities only get better. I think in the 5-year horizon, some of what I talked about is that third pillar. You'll be able to go on platforms like Khan Academy, and you'll be able to do it hopefully in almost any major language. I would say that's the other thing that's going to happen. We have 45 translation projects, but they're in different degrees of fidelity. But in the 5-year time horizon, I think in most languages, they're going to be it's going to be pretty robust. And not only will you be able to learn at your own time and pace and learn almost any subject in your language potentially, but you're going to be able to get artifacts of proof, a signal to the world that you know that material, that could be used to get a job, to get an apprenticeship, to get into graduate school, to get into undergraduate. And then if you go 10 years out, 15 years out, 30 years out, we talk a lot about this in our own organization. It's a world where if you just have access to a low-cost device And already much of the world does, some of the world doesn't. And I think that's another issue of the whole digital divide globally. But I think in 10 years, digital, a low cost, a smartphone like this is, we all have one, but we know many parts of the world don't. But in about 10 years, I think that'll be very accessible. Basic level broadband, at least to access something like a Khan Academy, will be, I think, hopefully fairly available. All of us might be doing, ultra high def virtual reality or something, but just to be able to watch videos or do exercises, I think that's going to be pretty common. And so, I like to imagine a world where no matter where you are born, any village, any school, anywhere, that you're able to tap into your potential and prove it to the world. And the example I always give, there's a young woman from Afghanistan named Sultana. This was about 6-7 years ago. She, the Taliban kept her from all the young girls in her town from going to school. And Khan Academy became her lifeline, starting when she was 12 or 13 years old. And through that, she was able to learn algebra and biology and chemistry and physics and trigonometry and calculus and statistics. And she decides that she wants to become a physics researcher. She essentially smuggles herself into Pakistan to take the SAT because it wasn't offered in Afghanistan, the scholastic achievement test that's taken to get into schools in the United States. She does surprisingly well for someone who's, for the most part, self-educated. And that's when I found out about her, because she was having trouble coming to the US for college. And then I started emailing folks, and luckily a op-ed columnist, Nicholas Kristof for the New York Times, found out about her and wrote an op-ed, Meet Sultana, the Taliban's Worst Fear. And that allowed her to get political asylum in the United States. And my last touch point with Sultana a few months ago, she was doing quantum computing research at Caltech.
Oh,
and
amazing.
And I give that example because for every Sultana that, we know about or who was able to do that, and obviously, I think Khan Academy can take a small amount of credit. Most of the credit is her own grit, her own resilience, her own just not willing to take no for an answer. But for every Sultana that's out there, think about how many, or that we find out about, or who goes on that journey, think about how many millions more didn't. How many millions more did not have that access. And so, to your 10-year vision, I would like to see, another million Sultanas every year. And then many, and hopefully many, and tens or hundreds of millions of folks who hopefully don't have the hardship of a Sultana, but because of what all of us are going to collectively build, we can really, we can create a world where everyone can tap into their potential.
Sal, that's the moment. I started with the fact that I'm not sure whether digital is not even connecting us better, but that's the moment. While listening to you, I would have come and hug you, and I'm so grateful for what you're doing. You're really changing that world. It's not like we want to change the world, we want to make that world better. No, you are doing it. And these sultanas, I'm sure there's so many sultanas from all around the world who, thanks to you, thanks to what you have done, the way you have done it, that you democratized education and in a scale that no one could have ever imagined. So grateful to have you with us. Please stay with us now. I know you have to do a hard stop at a certain moment, but now I will change the scenario, and my team in the studio will know it from now. I would love to have you together with our next guest. But before that, let me tell you who she is. She's the
Dr. Esther Wojcicki is an internationally known journalism teacher and the founder of the Palo Alto High School Media Arts program. Esther is a distinguished visiting scholar at Media X at Stanford and the 2011 Charles O'Malley Award recipient from Columbia Scholastic Press.
Hello, Esther.
Oh,
Esther, you have to unmute.
I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and so excited to hear Saul, who has done such an amazing job with what I consider democratizing education for the world. We hope that there'll be more Sultanas around the world that he described. I'm so impressed with this story.
I know, and we never go but for truly impressive people in the studio. You're one of them, dear. You are you are Esther. You're one and only Esther. And you have recently published your book, How to Raise Successful Children. And I think that there is almost single person in the world, if there is maybe one or a few, that don't know how successful your children are, your wonderful daughters, the CEO of YouTube, the CEO of 23andMe, and your daughter being in science and creating quite amazing things, including anthropology. And you are dubbed as the godmother of the Silicon Valley. I would call the fairy godmother of the Silicon Valley. Last time we've met, it was in Sofia, and you were so generously sharing that you don't need to travel around the world. You just come to WEBIT and the world comes to you. And now we all go to one place, internet, and connect with the world. So what a world we live in. I'm sure you can reflect to all the things that Sal has said, because I've read your book and we've been talking to you. Actually, no, I've met you in Vienna, if I'm correct, or it was somewhere else, Madrid last time.
Yeah.
But I know you've prepared some slides. And even though in this format, we don't have slides, no one is in a position to say no to Esther. So maybe we can start with the few slides you have, and then we can move on in a lively discussion, if that's okay for you, dear.
Oh, yes, that's great. That is great. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to have a few slides. You know, as a teacher, I'm always convinced that seeing and hearing is the best way for people to learn. So I will just start with the first slide here, which is we all need to work together. And probably this is something we all already know, but I just want to reemphasize the fact that we need the parents, the teachers, the school administrators, the businesses, and the government to work together to help our children be the best they can be. This is a crisis time for everybody. And there are 5 principles that I have of the at-home classroom, and it can be encapsulated in this acronym that I have come up with that is in my book, TRICK. And TRICK stands for trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. And what it does is it empowers students to do things like follow the Khan Academy software. Khan Academy has been one of my favorite platforms since day one. And I think Saul probably knows that, because I met Saul when Khan Academy was actually just about where he says it is right now, where he is now, in the closet. And he was doing amazing things back then. And now with 100 million people, it's just incredible. But what I say is that in order for your child or for people to feel like they can move independently on platforms like Khan Academy, you have to trust them and respect their ideas, give them some independence, allow them to collaborate with each other. Kids learn more from each other than they learn from anyone else. Peer-to-peer collaboration is the best. And kindness is so important, especially in today's world. And all this is in my book, How to Raise Successful People. It's in 21 languages. It's in Bulgarian as well, I'm happy to say. And
well, thank you so much.
And so
Go ahead, please.
It's probably in your language too. But yes, after being in Sofia, and I loved Sofia, I was like, it has to be in Bulgarian also. And so these principles are even more important today in online teaching in the face of the pandemic. We need to treat each other with kindness. The more kindness, kindness breeds more kindness. And just like violence breeds more violence. And so if we can all remember that and be trusting and respectful of other people, no matter what their ethnicity, no matter what their nationality, we're all in this together. And so there are these platforms. This is Learn at Home. This is from YouTube, of course, which is a special resource for families with children. And it's all curated. And of course, there is the Khan Academy that I love. And My students have been using Khan Academy since, I mean, I'm not kidding. I think it's been 10 years. And whenever they have any questions about anything, my philosophy has always been, it's important to be able to be a self-learner. And in order to, you can't always take your parents with you. You can't always take your teacher with you. You need to be able to find this out by yourself. Khan Academy is one place to do that. And so now, by the way, I have a free weekly newsletter that has parenting tips for everybody called thewajway.com. And I would just like to invite everybody to sign up. It's free and it just gives you parenting tips. I write a newsletter once a week. And I know Saul is doing, I think it's a daily newsroom, if I'm not mistaken. And it's every day at noon, which is like, oh my God, I can't believe it. He's doing it just like a teacher. And so, but he's the world's teacher. So thank you for listening and for giving me this opportunity to try to help. My goal, my whole life has been to be an effective teacher because I see education as the route to a happy life. So that is basically my whole presentation.
We are all the one that needs to say thank you to you for what you're doing, Esther. We have all these thousands of people with us now, and I see a lot of questions coming out through all the social media channels. I would like to have you now together with Sal and to discuss the most challenging, but at the same time, most probably most hopeful things that will change in our life. We know that every change brings positive and negative. It's never one-sided story. So if you go from the positive and the negative that are happening, and this question is for both of you, what do you think is the positive and the negative part of the changes we will see in the education system because of COVID, because of what we needed to do? Maybe to start with Esther.
Well, so I know this has been a very difficult time for everybody, and especially here in the United States, we've had one problem after another. But if we look at the silver lining, there's always a silver lining in every cloud and in every crisis. The silver lining here is that the education system has been totally disrupted, and we have to think about a new way to learn. And we have been learning actually, the way that we have been learning has been the way that people conceptualized learning 100 years ago, or maybe 500 years ago. And so it's the direct instruction, lecture-based model, and it just doesn't work. And so I would say that the best thing that's happened is now people are learning independently. There's personalization of education. You can learn at any time. And if you don't understand something, go back and you can watch it again, do it again. So I think that this is more accepted, more widely now. And before it was not accepted. It just was, kids that learned this way were looked at as, oh, a little unusual. And so more kids, I mean, this works for all kids and it needs to be accepted. And so that's what I think is the silver lining in where we are today. And so I know it's hard, and I know that parents are like stressed because, oh my God, what is my kid doing online? What are they watching now? Which is part of the trust and respect model that I have. You know, your kids are smart enough. They can also find good materials online if you point them in the right direction. And then you give them this opportunity to collaborate with their friends. Number one thing that they miss in this entire pandemic, number one, is their friends. And so if you can let them collaborate online with whatever it is they're working on, that will be one way to help mitigate the situation. So I don't know what Saul thinks.
Yeah, and also connected to Sal here, because I think that's something that connects these two questions. What are the cracks as a result of this fast, unplanned adoption of digital online education? That's where maybe both of you can answer. Sal, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the cracks are exactly what when we're talking about the positives and negatives. To Esther's point, this is made, kind of everything. It's a reboot of not just, of everything in our life, but especially what we're doing in education. And when you do that, it allows you to rethink everything from first principles to a certain degree. And there's an open-mindedness to change, really out of necessity. But your point about cracks, we know that as the world has had to virtualize, whatever you want to call it, become hybrid learning. There's different names for it. A lot of students don't have access. They or even and there's multiple layers to that. There's having a device, there's having internet access, and then even if you have those two things, are you in a home environment? As you know, large chunks of humanity lived in very tight quarters where there might be many family members in the same room. People need to share that device. Are they able to get a quiet working space? So that's the crack. That's the real digital divide, but it's mixed with other forms of inequity. The silver lining on that particular one is this has caused everyone, I've seen globally, I've definitely seen it here in the United States, it's made people very motivated to solve the digital divide. We've seen New York City School District, which is the largest school district in the United States, has 1.2 million students. People have been talking about the digital divide now for over 20 years, but because of COVID crisis, in a matter of 3 weeks, they distributed 300,000 devices. They got free internet access in partnership with the local telecom carriers. And so it's not going to completely solve everything. A lot of the students are still in home conditions that aren't ideal for learning. But essentially in a 3-week period, because of COVID, they were able to, for the most part, close the digital divide. And similar things have happened in other large cities around the world. So hopefully that has changed, because that's not just going to affect those children's or those families' education. That's going to affect their ability to participate in the economy. That's going to affect even their mental health. In this time of social distancing, could you imagine if we did not have video conferencing, if we could not get on Zoom or Google with our friends and family? So that's going to be a silver lining. And then the other silver linings are, a lot of what Esther and I have kind of been referring to, which is, by definition, for these 1.5 billion students right now, learning is not bound by time and space. Before, learning was bound by time and space. It
Indeed.
kind of happened in a particular time in a specific location. And so after the COVID crisis, we've always had summer learning loss. Like, why aren't we learning during the summer? Well, hopefully that's a norm that gets challenged. Why don't we depend on students to have their own agency, their own independence? Because frankly, you can spoon feed someone knowledge, and maybe they even learn some of that knowledge. But if they're used to being spoon fed, until they're 18 years old, 21 years old, 25 years old, then all of a sudden when they get into the workforce and they're in their late 20s and 30s, the world doesn't work that way. And so even more important than learning how to factor a polynomial or about photosynthesis is this ability to have agency, this ability to have independence, which I know Esther believes very strongly about. She's one of the, I would say, the nation, she's been recognized as the country's top journalism teacher. She's probably one of the top teachers in the world. But when you see her classroom, her kids have agency. They are taking charge, and she's there to support them. It's not her taking charge, and then they're doing a little bit of things on the margin. And that's the most important skill that we'd want for any child.
Yeah. Indeed. Actually, Esther was recognized twice, not only once, and in different years, quite distant. I mean, really, guys, I'm so much respected from both of you. Esther, are you worried about kids missing their tests?
You can't believe it. I'm not worried at all. And part of the reason I'm not worried is because a lot of the material that the kids were learning is just memorization for tests that they probably don't really ever need to take again anyway. And so one of the most important things that they should learn is agency, just exactly what Saul was talking about. Because prior to this, I'm not kidding, the school system and the parents were spoon feeding a lot of the kids, and spoon feeding them stuff that they didn't want to eat, that they would just basically want to spit out as soon as they had a chance. So if we could just believe in our kids having the ability to find interesting things that they want to learn and that they want to do, if there could be more trust and respect of the kids' innate ability to learn, I think that everybody will be better. And a lot of these tests, I mean, if you just think about it for yourself, I'm sure you all took tests. All of us did. And a lot of the material on that test, I can tell you I would flunk right now. I would not be able to pass a single one. And it's because I don't use those things. They're useless to me. But the parts of it that I do use, of course, I remember. It's just like a foreign language. If you studied it for 4 years in college and then you don't use it, well, you can't even say hello. So I think we need to remember that as really important. Hopefully our kids are learning things now that they care about, and they can do that because they have a lot of selection online. It's everywhere. All this learning material is all over the web, and let's give them an opportunity to become who they want to become. Just like that story I couldn't believe about that girl Sithana. Wow, what a great story. And I really have to give it to Nicholas Kristof for writing about it and for her to be able to pursue her dream. We
It's
need
a
more
phenomenal
kids,
story.
more
Yeah, indeed.
kids, more kids to do this. And they can if you trust and believe in them. And as you said, in my classroom, that's the thing that I believe in. My students do things independently on their own. In fact, I'd like to give a little shout out to the students, the Campanile students, who produced from home a 22-page full-size newspaper using all the software from Adobe, and 60 kids collaborated and produced this paper. And it came out as though it was just a normal situation, but they were all from home. And it was their idea. It was not my idea, I can tell you, because it looks like too much work to me. But anyway, more kids should
Yeah,
be empowered to do that.
absolutely. I'm taking the lead from what also Sal was mentioning about the summer. Actually, our kids was not allowed any IT access, any gadgets or whatever until the age of 7. And then look what happened now. They're not going. They're kind of somewhere between homeschoolers and private student schoolers. They go, they study in very small groups. We changed their education system ourselves. For that, they had to be at tests. So today they had the national test, one of our kids, and he was so excited, I would say, a little bit scared, very excited before the test. And now he's somewhere outside playing full power, feeling so empowered that he can study. He takes his tests at home. We'll be having a wonderful discussion with him. I'll be happy to hear after this show your advice. But I also don't believe in this 3-month vacations, because life never stops. Why you have to rest from education in general? So my question for both of you, but maybe starting with Esther, is what would be your advice for the parents to use the summer for with their kids?
I think the summer is an opportunity for kids to learn to do things around, I'm sorry, it sounds kind of boring, but around the house. Honestly, University of California at Berkeley, they started a course last year called Adulting, and they required students to take adulting. And that was how to teach kids to cook and to, how to do your laundry, how to make a bed. I mean, all these students were entering the University of California and they didn't have any basic skills. So one of the things parents can do is just include your kids in some of the things that are going on in the house. Let them plan the dinners for a week. Or how about just starting with the dinner for one day? And let's see what they can do in terms of planning, buying, budgeting. There's a lot of things that kids can learn to do around the house, and they learn life skills and feel good about it. So that's one thing that I would do. The other would be let them set up peer-to-peer kind of tutoring sessions. Kids love helping each other. And so they can do art projects together. You can have the older kids with the younger kids. I mean, my grandchildren just did the craziest thing of all. They made a T-shirt for me on some kind of a sewing machine that they had just purchased. I mean, and it's all embroidered. Well, it's amazing that they could do this. And the child that gave it to me is 8. So, I mean, there's a lot of things around the house and around the community that kids can do to work together on that. And I know they have all this social distancing situations now, but maybe kids from the same family or the same community area can be together. That's what I would do in the summer. And they can do things also, a lot of things outside, working together in the garden. Um, Kids can take care of plants too and take care of pets too. It shouldn't just fall on the shoulders of the parents.
Absolutely. Sal?
Yeah, I've spoken about the oddity of summer vacation and also just the fact that school ends at, depending where you are in the world, at 1 or 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Those are obviously both artifacts of the way society was structured maybe 150 years ago, where most of us worked on farms, including the students and the teachers. So they spent the summer kind of living an agrarian lifestyle. It's based on a world when the expectation was maybe the father works and the mother's at home, baking pies, and the student comes home at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and the mother can help tutor them and whatever else. And we know that that is not the world that we live in today. Frankly, it's not the world we've lived in for at least the last 50, 60 years. But we haven't really rethought it. And whenever I, argue that we should have full year, full day schooling, the initial reaction, and I probably would have reacted this way as a student if someone had suggested that,
Yes,
wait,
of course.
summer is when I was able to do the creative things. Summer was when I was able to work on projects that I was interested in. After school is when I did all of these interesting activities. And the point is that I agree, those are super powerful, but those should be happening as part of school throughout the year. That
Yes.
school should not
Yes.
be,
Absolutely.
to Esther's point, just this passive, you're getting these lectures and you're memorizing notes. It should be what Esther does with her students. They make an amazing school newspaper that any of us would have difficulty putting together, but these are teenagers who are doing it for the most part on their own with support from amazing teachers. And so that's kind of what all of learning should be in school. I recently spoke to the founder of Minerva, which is this online college.
He's a
which is doing
great
really
guy. I like him very much.
very, very interesting things. Ben Nelson, and he was
Ben,
talking
yeah.
about that there's knowledge and there's wisdom, and a lot of knowledge. That's what a Khan Academy or a MOOC could be good for. It's good for knowledge, and even while you're doing that knowledge, if you're doing it in an independent way, you're building metacognitive skills. You're building that agency. You're building that ability to drive your own learning. And then we need to think about experiences for wisdom in his term. And that's where you have the application. That's when you have the projects, creating a newspaper together. Because when you're creating a newspaper, not only are you, deciding how to format something or writing some things or making a cartoon or selling ads, you're learning how to work with people. You're learning how to negotiate. You're learning how to deal with conflict, which is really wisdom. And so I think there's an opportunity for that to be in a thread throughout the year, full day. And we started a school under our offices. It's called Khan Lab School, which essentially does that. It is a full day school, but if you visit the school, there's no, teacher at the front lecturing to 30 kids at any point of the day. It's most of the time when you go there, it's students who are as young as even 5 or 6 years old who are driving their own learning, or they're in groups with other students teaching each other or having a conversation with a teacher or doing one-on-one check-ins with teachers. So it completely changes the nature of school. It feels like summer all the time in a lot of ways.
So if we could just have more school like Khan schools, more schools that take these ideas and give kids an opportunity to work together. I saw Khan school multiple times, and kids are working together. I mean, the teacher's kind of off doing one thing or another thing, but the kids, they have projects that they're so passionate about. They keep working. I mean, it's even time to go outside and play, and they're still working. So I think, can we get this kind of passion in all schools by giving kids some agency and giving them the opportunity to work on things that they care about? That is, I mean, thank goodness for Khan and for Khan schools and for what, there's a lot of teachers out there. High Tech High also does a lot of this good work. And so we need to have more of an opportunity for more students to do that. And also, by the way, for all those teachers out there, it's easier to teach this way, so much easier, and it's much more effective. So just something for you to think about while you're planning for the next year.
Sal, Esther, I just wish we have like all the time and I can just soak your wisdom and spend time with you. But I know that both of you are very busy, your day just starts in Silicon Valley. We have some truly phenomenal guests coming up next. We're expanding this particular program by far. So I'm so grateful for both of you being with us. And with pain in my heart, I have to say bye to you in order to welcome our next amazing guest in the studio. Very grateful for your contribution. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you, Plamen.
Thank you. Thank you both. And now look who is coming next to our studio.
Sandra Pham is the president and CEO at West Coast University, offering both online and on-campus healthcare programs. Previously, Sandra held a variety of leadership roles at Kaiser Permanente, including CFO for Finance Operations and Vice President of Finance for the real estate portfolio, where she had financial oversight of the organization's multi-billion-dollar annual capital program. A respected leader in her field, Ms. Pham has been a guest lecturer at Oxford University.
Sandra, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your patience. It's
it was wonderful and fascinating to listen to.
I hope so that you have enjoyed it, and I'm sure that all our above 8,000 people stay with us still, even though there are these rules of the 20-minute, but you break rules. That's that's one of the things we do. Virtual world allows us. Sandra, so grateful to have you with us. Our viewers have heard your phenomenal biography, and there is no better person than you to discuss the future of work and education. I would like to actually focus a little bit more on the future of work, because we were discussing with Sal and with Esther the future of education, and at least part of their vision, of course. I'm just looking at the time, and definitely we expand. So let's go to a very few questions, and then also bring in another participant in our discussion to ask more questions, and also opening further questions from the audience. I have like over 100 questions from audience. This is not fair. We will not be able to ask them all, but whatever. So let's make the connection with the education and the future of work. What students thinking about college should consider due to the pandemic? What is your take on that?
You know what? I think it's a lot of the things that we heard. I think at the end of the day, it's not like what we all thought 60 days ago, where this was something we were all going to shelter in place, hunker down, and it would go away. I think what people are realizing now when they're thinking about education is they're going to have to think about how they choose the institution for college. It's going to have to be something that has a robust learning management system, and it's going to need to be nimble. It's going to need to be able to easily transition so that when something occurs, you go online and then you can go back on ground. Currently, right now, the CDC is recommending for all the universities and colleges, when something occurs, you need to make a decision with local public health within the next few hours to go back online. And then within 48 hours, you can go back on ground. So it's not like before where you have time to hand out computers, you have time to train your faculty. The reality is you need to be thinking about not only what kind of learning will I be getting in the classroom, but can this organization support me virtually in the same way to make sure it's engaging?
We were talking with Sal and Esther about the pros and cons of the change we see. Let's jump into how this pandemic and the new realities that we see and we will see in the future are impacting the workforce, and what will be the skills required after all the automation. I have a lot of friends who own plants, etc. So they're now considering in a very fast manner to integrate more robotics, because they had to stop during the pandemic and the lockdown. So their whole production is stopped. So they're considering now adding robotic arms, etc., more and more. So what do you think will be the future of the workforce?
I think in terms of the future of the workforce, towards your point, is going to include a lot more technology. I think it's going to move away from teaching students in terms of knowledge, but really thinking in terms of how to think, how to engage. I think actually listening to the conversation, that's what I do think virtual learning does so well. You know, it's not so much the sage on the stage where I have this piece of wisdom from Dr. Russev that I must get into my students. It's in regards to being able to flip the classroom and be able to say, you know, a person is presenting with shortness of breath and pain in the shoulder blades, you know, Plamen, what would you do next? And really being able to think through situations they haven't been in before. I think the other thing that's really getting people to think about is going to school is interesting. What do I do next? And people are being much more thoughtful and strategic in terms of what do I want to do and what do I need to be able to do that and do it competently. So I think that if anything, there's a lot more relations in terms of work and education now.
Well, I'm thinking of what would be, you know, the most crucial skills or mindset we would need to adopt in order to thrive in the post-COVID world. I think it's ease with technology and ability to think and problem solve. It's the ability to be comfortable in an uncertain situation and to be able to figure things out that you've never dealt with before, rather than being able to rely on to say, when this happens, then you do the following. Thank you. I had some technical issues with one of my cameras here. So, and by the way, I'm grateful for your short answers. We usually play the game of maximum 3 minutes, but you are very much straight to the point. So thank you so much, Sandra. In that very moment, I would like to invite to our studio another participant here who is going to be helping us moderate and ask more questions. Look who he is.
Jacob Morgan is a 4-time best-selling author, keynote speaker, and trained futurist who explores leadership, employee experience, and the future of work. He is the founder of futureofworkuniversity.com, an online education and training platform that helps future-proof individuals and organizations by teaching them the skills they need to succeed in the future of work.
Jacob, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. You're another best-selling author that we have today. And the truth is that I will have an open request to all of you to come back again in the future of work and education sessions, because there will be so many questions unanswered. And I feel so sorry for all these thousands of people with us here waiting to hear their questions. And you have the future of your work and university.com, and you are joining this discussion to move ahead with all the questions we have. I would like also to ask now to have another participant joining who will help us moderate the whole discussion. Look who she is.
Christina Zdanowicz is a senior producer at CNN. Her expertise lies in online storytelling, breaking news, user-generated content, and finding great stories. She is a leader at CNN Digital and manages the hectic evening shift for the Social Discovery team, the network's hub for social media news gathering.
Welcome, Christina.
Hi, guys.
Hi there. Thank you so much for your patience being with us. And I hope that at least from a journalistic media point of view, you have heard things that might be a good material for you to make one of your deep dives into that particular area, future of work and education. Now we are all of us, and I would love to get this very interactive. Again, hundreds of questions, 100+ questions here, but you are the ones that are in the studio.
So I would like to go for a very interactive discussion. I have a bunch of questions I would like to open to all of you. Let me start with Jacob and ask him, what trends do you see in the next few years? We already discussed with Sandra about this. So what is your point of view? How does the future workforce look like?
Well, there are a couple of trends. So just to give people some context, I had the opportunity to interview 140 CEOs and ask them what are going to be some of the big trends that are shaping the future of work. And there were a couple of trends that they identified, some of them that you guys have already talked about, things like the overall pace of change, artificial intelligence and technology is a big trend, globalization, the changing nature of talent, even a shift and focus more towards ethics and transparency was another big trend that came up. So I would say those are some of the major ones. Diversity and inclusion is another big aspect. All of these things are going to shape the way that we build and structure our organizations, and even the way that leaders have to lead their organizations. But at least from the CEOs that I interviewed, these were some of the top trends that they identified as shaping the future of work.
Thanks, Jacob. I would like to go now to Sandra, because I know from very clear sources, trustworthy sources, that only in Europe, there are 3 million doctors in the hospitals missing. Not missing, sorry, lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And missing, thanks God. No, so lacking. And we talk about radical change here because it's a phenomenal need. Obviously, AI and technology most probably will change some of these numbers. But my team has prepared some reports, and they're telling me that they found out that West Coast University students are taking their internship in hospitals on the front of the combating the COVID-19. What are the challenges that training healthcare professionals are facing during the pandemic?
Oh, that's a great question. What is different for us in terms of being a healthcare university? So there's nurse practitioner, physician's assistants, physician, all of those. But most importantly, you can't just flip it and do everything virtually, even during this time. The reality is you're training your healthcare providers. So some of the knowledge can be done virtually, and yet at the same time, they, as part of their curriculum, they have to have direct patient care hours. So even during this time, the students are going out to hospitals. They're going out, they're volunteering at COVID-19 testing sites. They're doing patient screening. They are using technology and assisting in telehealth appointment. But part of the issue that they have during these challenging times is that, you know what, they can't learn everything in the classroom because they never have, whether it's an in-place classroom or a virtual classroom. They have to be where the future patients are going to be. And I think we can all appreciate that. None of us want to be the first patient that someone has actually laid hands on before. So during this time, the big challenge for them is, yes, they're shelter in place in terms of certain of their classes. And then for certain other things, they go, they gown up, and they're in the hospitals. They're helping screen patients. They're at the COVID-19 sites where people wonder whether they're having their symptoms mean they actually have something, but they're actually working out their screening and taking care of patients. They're helping in terms of telehealth appointments so that urgent cares and doctors' offices are not impacted during the time. So that's the challenge that they have right now, that, you know what, for our future healthcare providers, they're not completely shelter in place as part of their education. They're actually already on the front line taking care of all of us.
Indeed, Sandra. And this is the thing that we've seen during this pandemic. We've seen sacrifices. We've seen real heroes. And obviously, there could be heroes without walls. There could be heroes who save, not heroes who kill. That's so great.
Well, and I think part of it is also the nature of the students. People go into these fields knowing what they want to do. So you do have some of the situations where people are fearful. And then you have the situations from, don't forget, these students are in their early 20s. They think they're invincible, right? So in some points, you also have the people where they think this is what we've been training for. I want to be there. And if anything, it's hard because they're constantly looking for volunteer opportunities. So even before all of this, they always wanted to do healthcare screening for homeless populations, all of those things right now, setting up free healthcare clinic, free dental clinics. And so right now during this time, it's actually hard because we have to screen all of their volunteer opportunities to make sure that they're appropriately set up, that they have appropriate personal protection, that there are appropriate people in order to help and monitor and to escalate to if it's something beyond what these students are learning about. But it's, I think you said it really well. I mean, you see a lot of things, and what you also see during this time is a lot of amazing things from people, a lot of amazing compassion, and a lot of amazing bravery.
Because we, the people, are amazing.
Yeah, that is absolutely
like everything in this beautiful world, of course. I would like to request the amazing Christine to join us here and to jump full-fledged in this discussion. Christine, I know you have a lot of questions to ask. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to start with something. I mean, I really like the conversation about silver linings that we had in the education portion of this. So I was wondering if, both Jacob and also you could speak to what are the silver linings and what are the positive things that have come out of the pandemic that will hopefully make the future of work a better place.
Well, I do think one of the positive in terms of the education, I have to say is, I don't know what it is everywhere, but I do know in a lot of traditional universities, there's always been a sense of looking down or thinking that online learning is a fad. This has been the great social experiment where you have traditional faculty who would never have considered this being forced to find a way to be equally effective in this setting that they would never have chosen for themselves, pluck them out of the classroom, but also forcing people to get familiar with technology. Now I can't break people up into small group discussions. I need to learn how to use collaborative space to break the students up into virtual classrooms, bring them back to present and be able to use it in order to flip it and help teach each other. So I think some of the silver lining is that people have been forced to find ways to adapt if they want to be as effective in terms of what we're doing. I think we've also seen that in the workplace in wonderful forums like this, where because we're not having a chance to see each other or poke heads or have hallway conversations, we're all overcompensating in terms of reaching out, checking in with each other, and communicating more than ever before, being much more thoughtful about it, being more thoughtful about who to include, because you can't assume that everyone you need is going to be in a meeting some point of the day.
And for me, I think there are a couple things. So one, for leaders out there, we've seen a big shift away from, for example, focusing on AI and automation and simply worrying about job performance to really focusing on the humanity aspect of work. So leaders who are genuinely caring about their people, they're doing story time with their kids, they're checking in on their employees as individuals, as human beings first, and then worrying about the profits and all that other sort of stuff later. The second thing I think that we've seen is a lot of these organizations that have been talking about things like digital transformation or thinking about the future of work, they've been talking about that for decades. And then in a span of 6 months, what we've talked about doing in decades, all of that got compressed. And now basically a lot of this evolution and transformation has happened over the past 3-4 months that companies have been trying to do for decades. Flexible work programs, changing leadership styles, just reevaluating how work gets done, upgrading technologies, all this stuff has happened in such a very compressed time period that I think finally a lot of the things that we've been talking about when we've been saying the future of work are starting to come to fruition. So I think those are two big things.
Right. I absolutely agree. I also would just like to build on in terms of it's similar to what Esther's comment was in terms of education about trust. I think you're also seeing a difference in terms of trust, in terms of management. A lot of times there was a reluctancy before of having people work remotely. And in my words, I would say it was a question of trust. How do I know that Jacob is going to be as productive at home on his schedule as he is on mine when I can see him outside my door? And I think that's what people have also learned, to extend trust in terms of, give people what is needed, let them figure out the way to do it, and let them make sure they meet your deadline. But you don't need to tell them not only what you need, but how you want it done.
Thank you, Sandra. Christina?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, I never worked from home. Like, I'm a journalist. I work at CNN. It was only if, I'm getting my door fixed or something like that. And now we've been working remotely for, I think this is week 12. So it's been a little bit crazy. But I will say it's like definitely over communicating your needs. We're checking in with our teammates. We have like a morning news huddle, and then I do an afternoon one with the PM crew. And we're all working, well, the work-life balance thing has blurred a bit because I'm covering the pandemic and the George Floyd protests right now.
Oh, definitely.
So it's just been like around the clock and crazy. But I will say that, I mean, I feel like I'm hearing new voices, people speaking up who might not have before. And, so I am seeing some definite benefits, and it has been a good thing. And I feel more invested in the work than ever. I don't know if that's true for you guys as well.
Oh, I think that's definitely true. If anything, I worry right now is a little bit about burnout because of what you said so well, Christina. There's a blurring now between work and family life in terms of it. Part of it is there's a greater sense of responsibility in making things done. But the other thing is just so convenient, right? It's so convenient not to have the workday end. It's so convenient to pick up the phone, do a quick text, jump and check your emails during this time. And you forget whether it's a Saturday or a Thursday sometimes, quite frankly. And I know a lot of people forget that when they schedule sometimes too. So I do think that's a little bit that is different right now. I think that might be one of the charges where figuring out where there is that appropriate balance and still that productivity and building on all, like as Plamen said so well, there's been a lot of silver linings during these great, great tragedies.
Absolutely. Well, Sandra, I would like to hear from you what schools and colleges have to think about in resuming education on campus, and when do you see this happening?
For right now, I'll be really open about it. I don't see it resuming the way it used to until 2021. Now, many universities, even when we're shut down right now, like West Coast University, we are looking at opening up as soon as we can in a limited capacity. All lecture classes should remain online, but we have skills labs and simulation labs and science labs that a lot of the students do want the opportunity to practice on high fidelity mannequins. You want to be spotted when you have to put in and practice putting in a catheter so many times. So you're going to see a limit. But what I think a lot of universities are thinking about is what we're all thinking about, which is how to do this, how to meet the needs of the students and our employees, and most importantly, to keep them safe. How do we do this and keep them safe during this time? There's a lot that can be done very effectively in terms of virtual learning. And then there's certain things that can only be done hands-on. But how do we make sure that we can keep them safe? How do we make sure that we can maintain social distancing? How do we make sure that they're all appropriately protective? And how, most importantly, do we know when something needs to happen and we need to quickly abandon mission and go back to sheltering in place? And when is it safe to bring someone back? For traditional universities in the fall, I would be really cautious in terms of thinking through, it's such a big part of the university experience to live in dorms and go to dining halls and gain your 15 pounds as a freshman who can eat whatever you want. But I would think through those things. I would think through those things in terms of knowing how can you be kept safe, and what happens if your dorm has to close down. Christina knows this really well, but we've had some really tragic situations where universities buckled down and they gave everyone 48 hours to clear from the dorms. Well, that sounds like that makes sense if you have a home to go to. That wasn't always the case. Yeah. International students didn't have homes. There were people who couldn't get plane rides, and stories about parents driving 14 hours so that they can collect their child and their belongings from the curbside. And so you really have to think through, does your university have a plan for when that happens? There were people who some universities like Brown did it really well, where I have a friend who works there, where there were places where students didn't go to, but they were still able to have grab and go meals and be able to take care of the necessities of life. We talked about the necessities of education, having computer technology and having broadband. Don't forget, when you're a student living on college, you have to think about the necessities of shelter and food that will also help you in terms of facilitating your learning environment. And I think while we were dealing with this, some of the universities struggle with being able to look at that as a whole and made assumptions about people's lives. So I think you need to be able to talk to your university and say, what if this occurs? What's the plan for me? We had situations in terms of reading such sad stories in terms of universities where students couldn't find housing when they didn't have that opportunity, and having to have organizations reach out and help them, or having them sleep on the couch of another wonderful student's family. But, I think those are the things you have to think about.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say that I'm thanking for these wise words, because I'm sure that a lot of students and a lot of universities have to get prepared. And here is maybe the last question, though, for Jacob, because we are way beyond time, but I've already announced that in advance that it's going to be like this. Jacob, what will work and leadership look like in the post-COVID world? You see, I'm asking you such an easy question, and you have just a short time to answer.
Well, it's kind of what I talked about, right? I mean, I think leaders are going to have to focus on being more human, whereas the humanity aspect comes first and then the business comes second. And we're already starting to see that now. So I think we're going to really have to change the way that we think about leadership. And this is consistent from a lot of the CEOs I interviewed. Leadership is going to be something that's earned, not something that's given to you. Leadership is going to be about helping make other people more successful than you. Leadership is going to be about the humanity of business, about focusing on transparency and ethics, and letting people know what you stand for as a leader. And as far as what is the future of work going to look like, there can kind of be two arguments made, right? So throughout history, whenever big changes happen, sometimes things just go back to the way they used to be, and sometimes changes lead to kind of evolutions of new things. So my hope is that after this pandemic is over, that this isn't going to be something that just goes back to the way it used to be, but this will be an evolution of work, where we will challenge conventional workplace practices. We will rethink things like workplace flexibility. And we'll also use this as a time to challenge other things like performance management review, things like where we recruit people from, like the requirements that we need from people who are going to be joining our organizations, just challenging all of these conventional, outdated ideas that we have about work. So I hope that really at the, in the coming years, we will almost rebuild and redefine our organizations. We'll think differently about what it means to be an employee, what it means to be a leader. I mean, if you look up the synonyms for the word employee in the dictionary, you'll find that synonyms include cog, servant, and slave. And if you look up the synonyms for manager in the dictionary, you'll find that synonyms for those include slave driver, boss, and zookeeper. And work, synonyms for that include daily grind, drudgery, and struggle. And so when you think about that, it's, throughout history, that's how we viewed these things. So it's time for us to redefine and rethink employee, work, leader, and manager. And I hope that we will use this as an opportunity to do just that.
Wonderful. It's been such a great discussion. One of these positive discussions that there are no fear from the future. There is only positive and very bright discussion on how we can make the most of it. And regardless of how amazing and positive it is, it has to come to an end. And I'm very grateful to all of you. I'm very grateful to Sal, to Esther, to Sandra, to you, Jonathan, to, of course, to Christina, who I will be having the pleasure to see later this week again. I'm very grateful for this. I would wrap up with a very simple quote. And it goes like this: the future belongs to the educated. And everyone else will, we all will see a lot of challenges and we'll all see a lot of changes, but the educated will be those who will hear and will know the answers first. Saying that, I would like to continue just by saying that this week is having two more events under the Future of Work and Education. WEBIT Virtual is hosting the demo day with founders, 3 great, amazing founders and 5 investors, including me, vetting them. Don't miss this tomorrow. You will be in a position to vote and provide the award of the audience. Otherwise, you all know that we are running the world's biggest startup challenge with 4,500 companies applying $1 million award. And the participants tomorrow are a very curated, fine selection of the best in the area of the future of work and education. So are the investors who are joining us tomorrow for live vetting. And then the day after, we shall be meeting, again, my favorite part of the week, the Leading Media Forum. Some great representatives of media. Christina is coming back representing CNN. We have the Globe, the Fast Company, CGTN America, and BuzzFeed. All of them together with us as part of the Leading Media Forum here, reflecting on the future of education and work. I wish we had more time with Jonathan and Sandra to talk about their books, to talk about what they're doing. I'm very kindly asking all of you, Google them, go to Amazon, check their books, and I'm sure you will be learning and enjoying reading them. Thank you all for being with us. We're exactly 22 minutes overdue today, but with such amazing panelists, this is inevitable. Thank you for being with us. Again, we have over 5,000 people at the end. Thank you, wonderful WEBIT community, and have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow.
This program is powered by the Virtual.show, making your offline events virtual.